The crisis in the liberal international order, insights from history, theory, and current events. So we've gotten used to a world based on rules and institutions, what is often called by international relations scholars the rules-based international order, the liberal international order, the rules-based global system. There are various terms that are used, and many believe that that is now under threat or under strain, if it even exists at all. And so it's important to give ourselves some background. What our present world order, which again some believe may now be faltering, really came out of the ruins of the Second World War. In fact, was born, or conceived, I should say, before the end of the Second World War, 1944, while the war was still raging. But at that point, after the United States entry into the war in 1942, after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, it seemed pretty clear that the Allies would defeat the Axis powers. And so the Allies met in Bretton Woods at a fashionable resort hotel in New Hampshire to create some of the institutions that they wanted to put into place to govern the global political economy, or global economic order at least, after the war ended. And so the Bretton Woods Conference, as many of you know, I'm speaking both to my students and other interested viewers who might see this, led to the creation of the World Bank, of the International Monetary Fund. So the World Bank created in the first instance for the reconstruction of Europe, and then for economic development in the countries of the South. The International Monetary Fund to run a global monetary order based on the United States fixing the price of gold at $35 an ounce, and everybody else fixing on to the U.S. And later on, what came to be called the GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which then became the World Trade Organization. Now, and add to that the rest of the panoply of institutions under the UN system, military alliances like NATO, with its famous Article 5, an attack on one is an attack on all. So what we saw coming into being was a rules-based international order, a system in which the rule of law and rules were embedded in institutions. And this was very much a creation of the United States as the super hegemon at the end of the Second World War. It was the creator and the guarantor of the system. And so the premise of this liberal international order is that cooperation is good for everyone, including for the hegemon, not just for everybody else. And so the United States at that point had emerged so far ahead of everyone else militarily, economically. It was a manufacturing superpower, military superpower, that they felt that they could create this global public good, this liberal international order, and that it would benefit everybody else and would benefit the United States. And in large measure, that promise was borne out over the next decades. Successive rounds of GATT and then WTO, but it was principally GATT negotiations, led to a drastic reduction in trade barriers, first among the rich countries of the West, what we now call the North, and then starting in the 80s and really in the 1990s, major countries of the South, China and India in particular, coming on board in a big way. And that rules-based system gave us global prosperity. It gave us an economic boom that led to rapid economic growth, rapid growth in productivity, both in the United States and the rich countries of the West, the North, and then in leading countries, major countries of the South, China, India, Brazil, South Africa, and many others. So far, so good. What was the problem? One problem was that this system glossed over the losers from a rules-based system that was premised on free, or really freer, international trade. That was the linchpin, and then free capital flows came later, after the collapse of the Bretton Woods monetary system in 1972 onward, but that's a different discussion for another time. The problem was that while freer trade, or what integration to what we then came to call globalization, led to aggregate gain, in other words, all countries that participated in the global economy gained, but it led to distributional consequences that created that losers as well as winners, and the losers weren't well compensated, and this stored up trouble for the future. These were the seeds of then the backlash against globalization. And we saw that really as early as the 1992 US presidential election campaign, in which NAFTA was the key point of contention in the election. The NAFTA negotiated by President George H.W. Bush between the US, Canada, and Mexico, and candidate Bill Clinton, Governor Bill Clinton of Arkansas, who was more circumspect on NAFTA. And then don't forget the insurgent candidate, Ross Perot, and his famous comment in that much viewed clip, and I remember watching it live on television in one of the debates, of the giant sucking sound of American jobs being sucked down to Mexico if the NAFTA came into being. So there's pretty much a direct line from 1992 to 2016, or if you want to go back, 2015 Brexit in the UK, 2016, when again trade, now NAFTA had been in effect for more than 20 years, 15 years. So it was again contentious. And then candidate Trump, in a sense, came out of nowhere and was able to bottle the zeitgeist, the angst, the disaffection of blue-collar America, of the Rust Belt, of those left behind, those in the so-called flyover zone, where those who had profited from international commerce, from globalization, were the elite on the two coasts. So people in banking and finance and real estate, in media, in entertainment, in professions, in IT, of course. And so that really powered Mr. Trump to the White House for the first time around in 2016. The election of 2016, 2017, he became president for the first time, 45th president. And it's noteworthy that while there were many differences in rhetoric and many other major differences between Trump and Biden, President Biden, when he came into office, 2021, kept many of the Trump 1.0 era tariffs on China. He did not get rid of them. There was a certain softening of rhetoric, but the basic turn away from the unbridled embrace of free markets and free market capitalism, globalization, did not reverse. And we've now seen what has happened with Trump 2.0, with a more aggressive use of tariffs as sort of an all-purpose geopolitical tool, attempting to reshore manufacturing in America as a cudgel, if you like, in geopolitical matters. For example, possible territorial expansion, talk about annexing Canada as a 51st state, musing about that, or Greenland. And so one could say that one could raise the question that are we now at the end of the road for this liberal rules-based order? And if that order is now, if the dusk is falling on that order, and it's a great, beautiful quote from the German philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, which I really love, that the owl of Minerva takes flight only as the dusk begins to fall. And it's a very enigmatic passage in Hegel, But a very simple way to understand it is that when we're in the middle of something, we don't really know what when that thing is ending. So we don't know exactly unless we cheated and looked at our app or looked at what's the exact time of sunset on the weather network or whatever it is. We don't know exactly when at the microsecond where the dusk falls. We don't have the wisdom of the owl of Minerva. Minerva, of course, being the Roman name for the Greek goddess Athena, the goddess of wisdom. So we don't know. Is this the end of the road? Is this a fork in the road? Are we on a side road? Are we going into reverse? So all of those are up in the air. But what we do need to do next, so this is part one. I'm doing these recordings in segments. I tried to record them all in one shot, and the app glitched, and I have had to restart again. So that's the challenge that question that we're looking at, and we're going to now juxtapose liberalism or the liberal idealistic view of the world against a very different view, the realist view.